Women's History Month is here again, and one way Chicagoans can learn about the contributions of some influential past area residents is on a bus. The Women Who Built Chicago bus tour launched for Women's History Month in partnership with Ancestry highlights overlooked women's contributions. The tour explores Southside history, honoring figures like Chicago's first black female CPA, Margaret Burroughs, librarian Vivian Harsh, who created the Chicago Public Library's first special Negro collection, blues singer Dinah Washington, the Queen of the Blues, and others. To talk with me today about the Women Who Built Chicago bus tour is one of the co-hosts of the event. Nicka Sewell-Smith is a consultant and documentarian with more than 20 years of experience as a genealogist. She has extensive experience in researching the enslaved and their communities, is an expert in Mississippi Delta genealogy, and currently serves as a senior story producer at Ancestry, the global leader in family history and consumer genomics. Nicka has appeared on Today, CNN, MSNBC, an Emmy-winning episode of Who Do You Think You Are, and has been interviewed by Oakland Tribune, National Geographic, and Time magazine. She is the host of Black Pro Gen Live, an innovative web show with more than 130 episodes focused on people of color, genealogy, and family history. Nicka Sewell-Smith, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
For the listeners, please share with us a little bit about where you grew up and your connections to Chicago.
That's a really great question. I grew up in Southern California. I'm a Los Angeles County born and bred. So when the Super Bowl happened, not this year, but last year, and it was Kendrick, it was fully my element. It was so much nostalgia there for me. But had I been born a year earlier, I would have been born on the south side of Chicago. That's where my parents met. And ironically, when my parents got married, my dad had already made the journey out to Southern California, and my mom was still in Chicago. So their Cook County marriage license actually says that my father is a resident of California and my mom is a resident of Chicago. And for me, the Great Migration story on both sides of my family essentially is birthed in Chicago. Through my mom's side, we get there because of a grand uncle of mine who was in World War I. And then when he, went back into civilian life, the place he went was Chicago, and he worked at the VA. And as a result of that, he started a chain of family members leaving Northeast Louisiana and moving to Chicago, to the point now where there are hundreds of my family members that live there. And there's even a senior center on the south side called the Southeast Atlas Senior Center that is named after one of my first cousins.
That's outstanding. Wow. I really like that. Did your parents go to high school in Chicago, or are they
Yeah. Both my parents went
grew
to,
up?
yeah, they did. My mom went to Hyde Park. My father went to DuSable. And it's crazy. There's Kenwood grads. There's all kinds of just stories there. Even my cousin Jean Sparrow, who's a news magnate in Chicago, has been on the radio for years. The whole reason why she came to Northwestern was because her mom went to Northwestern, and so and that wouldn't have started without our uncle doing that. On my dad's side, they came from New Orleans, and they settled in Bronzeville. And my grandfather actually ran for the mayor of Bronzeville through the Chicago Defender. I remember him telling me this story about it, and it was actually kind of a little bit of an urban legend, because my mom was like, "Your grandfather lost horribly." Like, she was saying this about her father-in-law, but when I went and did the research on Ancestry, I found out actually he did not. He got several million votes, and my mom still was skeptical. To this day, she still is not willing to accept it. But it just really speaks to, just again, for me, my connection to Chicago and how it's such a central part of who I am. Even though from a just cultural perspective, my family is really largely from Louisiana and Mississippi, and with a little touch of Oklahoma and the Cherokee Nation, Chicago it's like home two or three for me.
It sounds like it's deep embedded in you, which is fantastic. What were you like as a kid? Were you into sports? Were you a big reader? Or were you a band geek?
You know what? It's so funny. As much as I'm into music, I cannot play any instruments. Like, I've never actually, well, let me take that back. I was of the era when everyone wanted a keyboard this is I'm giving my age. Little Casio keyboards. And my sister, she's gonna hate that I told this story, but it's so true. We're both creatives. So my sister's a dancer and I love the arts and storytelling and stuff like that. And my sister did not finish her accordion lessons. Now, I don't know what made my mom think that a little black girl in Southern California wanted to play the accordion, but she got her lessons, she didn't finish. And so because she didn't finish her lessons, the younger child did not get music lessons. so,
Mm.
so I had a piano and I kind of taught myself how to play a little bit. But I was in dance. That was what I did, dance, cheerleading, that sort of a thing. And then even when I was in middle school, I didn't know this at the time, but I had this whole concept of like editing. So I figured out how to connect two VCRs together and how to use one as a source and the other one as this sounds nuts, but the fact that I was doing this as a middle schooler is it was equivalent to what they call fan cams on social media, where they will make them for artists like BTS and things like that. I was doing that for Jodeci because I'm a Jodeci aficionado. I love Jodeci. So I was editing fan cam videos back in the 90s, and that's how I taught myself how to edit. And then because I was in dance, I learned how to edit music. My dad audiophile. You can't see me, you all are listening to me, but I have vinyl albums all around me. And my dad really is the one who started that. My dad was a DJ. And so I had two multiple tape decks. We had Technique turntables. I remember going to Radio Shack to go and pick up the needles and all of that. So I learned how to edit music. And all of these skills are things that come together for me in the job that I currently work, right? And in working in just being a creative and all of that. And it's a trip. Like, you think about those things that you did as a kid that someone might have thought were quirky. It's like, why is this little girl connecting these two VCRs? But like now I love to edit. I love film. I love TV. I love music. All those things that I sort of nurtured into myself. I can see them definitely bubbling up now. And especially in my son. My son is 11 and he plays four instruments. So the fact that I didn't necessarily get the lessons, I guess I kind of doubled up on him.
Now, does he ever see his auntie and say, "It's because of you that mom never learned how to play"? Does he ever? He should
You
do
know what?
that.
I could totally hear him saying that, but that's the thing. In the end of it all, it still ended up coming together. It's a trip, especially when me and my sister go to productions. Like if we're in New York and we go to see a stage play, we're both watching aspects of that thing that other people are not. Like she's looking at lighting cues, and I'm looking at stage placement and lighting and audio, and it just makes me wonder, especially from an ancestral perspective, like who was that perspective? Who how did that part of us get nurtured? Like who was doing that back then before they had all these things like digital streaming and like all of that stuff? Because it's crazy. I mean, I send my sister videos of like a choreography that I love or like music that I love. That's my love language. If I send you tracks on, streaming platforms, if I send you videos, that's my love language. It's like, here, come into my world, come into my art, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, this is what I'm enjoying now, and I want to share it with you. I think it's a wonderful thing. So, when did your interest in genealogy develop?
So for me, it started very early on. On the particular branch of the family I've been talking about, we've had family reunions my entire life. So I didn't grow up not knowing getting together every 2 years with folks from all over the country and now technically the world. And just sitting around listening to the elders, looking at my grandmother with her siblings and hearing stories. I come from a family of storytellers, like, and I don't think I realized that, but now I'm very clean. I think that might have been like why my mom and my dad like gelled, is because they both come from a family of storytellers. And I remember we were at a family reunion here in Memphis where I live now, and one of my mother's first cousins had, in the olden days of genealogy and family history, he had interviewed the elders. He had gone to the National Archives in Washington, D.C. He had gone to the courthouse where our family was from. and he had put all of what he got together in a family tree. And I remember rolling it out on the table, and it was one of the first things I read by myself. I remember that. And I was quizzing my mom on everybody. Where is this kid? How come I don't know them? They're my age. Where do they live? And I'm expecting her to have all these answers. And she's like, I don't know. I don't know. That's so and so. And so, as time went on, I made the assumption that my cousin was kind of maintaining this tree, but he wasn't. And then when I got into college, and I'm aging myself, the internet just came out. And that sounds crazy to say that, but it did. It had just come out. And I remember, wanting to keep our family kind of in connection when we weren't having reunions. So I literally learned how to hand code HTML and how to build a website. And it was my goal to have people have the ability to search for their name online and find it on a list and realize that they were related to us. And now that's a reality. It sounded crazy at the time, but people were like, "Are you serious?" No. And so I got some genealogy software, and I entered that information on that tree. I brought in some more sources. And so now that was the beginning of what I do now. It was hunting the stories down, finding the records. And it's amazing to watch what that project has done over the last 26 years. Because now my family, if they get a new DNA match, they don't call me to figure it out. They have already done the work, and they call me to confirm that what they thought was correct, which is nuts. They use our family history book as like almost like a phone book. They go and look the pages up. They don't ask me how we're related. It's again, I every time I think about it, I'm just like, wow, like we're at this place. And so now I'm trying to get the other three grandparents' families on the same page as that one.
Well, I honestly remember mid 90s, I was actually living in Los Angeles, and somebody gave me a family tree CD set. And it had a lot of information on there, and it was like design your own tree. At the time, I didn't have much interest in it. So I guess the question that I have for you is how do you go from being interested in genealogy to saying, I'm going to make this my career?
I think it just kind of chose me. I think my curiosity, as my mom would say, she always tells me I could be a private investigator. That's like her joke. But then if you also ask her what me and my sister do for a living, she says I dig up dead people. My sister dances all day long. Um, my sister's the director of a dance program. And I just deal with dead people. It's funny. But I think it kind of chose me because I really early on, same thing where you had that box of 15 discs that had all these things on it. And I remember at the time thinking, this family tree is great, but like there's another way I could tell this story. Like there's another way I could make this come alive. And this website is that. And when I went to college for journalism. And at the time, I remember they would track you into only one discipline. You could just do print, or you could just do television and film, or you could just do radio. And I wanted to do all three. I didn't want to be restricted. And I remember at the time, like that was a little crazy. But now when you go to journalism school, everybody learns all three. And so for me, I wanted these stories and these records to pop in a specific way. So I learned how to edit, going back to my two VCRs. That was like a little skill that I had that I didn't have to learn what everyone else had to learn. I was already there because I was doing it for stuff that I loved and I was passionate about. And so it just kind of chose me. I was doing other work, I was doing other things, but I was able to build my skills up in terms of my craft outside of work and challenge myself in that way with stuff that I loved and I was familiar with. And so by the time I landed Ancestry, I had created a documentary. I had done several family reunion DVDs, edited things together, several volumes of family history. And so it was just this thing that I nurtured outside of my quote unquote day job that now I just feel so blessed and honored to have the opportunity to do this day in and day out.
In looking into your own genealogy, have you ever had moments where you were just so blown away by something you discovered, you had to pick up the phone and call people right away and go, oh my gosh, you're never going to believe it?
Absolutely. I have many of those moments. I think more recently, it was when we got to the first ending of Sinners, and they go into current day, and here's comes Buddy Guy out performing. And I was sitting in the theater and I had to cover my mouth because I audibly gasped because I said, oh my goodness, this is his story. And the only reason why I sort of know that is because our ancestors were enslaved together. If it's not that, it's this the branch I've been talking about. It took me 20 years to research that side of the family, and when I finally found our ancestors as enslaved people after that journey of just collecting living family members, but just really having questions about our ancestors as enslaved people, finding out that our ancestor slaveholder was the nephew of Andrew Jackson, President Andrew Jackson. It's discovering, that I have an ancestor who was a U.S. deputy marshal and who rode with Bass Reeves and was a U.S. Civil War veteran. It's all of those things. It's the notable folks, and it's the people who weren't as notable, who don't have Wikipedia pages, who, at the time, I don't think anyone would necessarily think that they were remarkable, but they're remarkable to me and they're remarkable to our family. And yeah, I mean, I could go on and on. I find stuff all the time. And a lot of my genealogy buddies, they tease me and they say, "Gosh, the ancestors just love you. Like they just love you because you just find these things that no one else can find." And I'm like, I don't do anything special. I just go with my gut and my curiosity and I see where it leads me. And it's a beautiful existence and experience to be free like that in an area, in a place where you know that you're supposed to be, because I think sometimes people get caught up on whether or not someone else feels that thing or they feel that nudge, when in reality the most important aspect of it is that you felt it and you felt it was legitimate and you chased it down. And that's something that it took time for me to hone and to connect with, but it's something I rely on every day.
And you've learned how to use the tools, which is super important as
Yes.
well. So
Yes.
your Insta, which I was checking out earlier, shows you've been telling stories starring your ancestors since '99, which I love the wording of that. What elements of those efforts do you find most gratifying?
Oh, wow. It is, I often talk about it as like the moment when the dopamine like falls down, like trickles down, like, just like think of little stars coming down from the ceiling or from the sky. It's when it's the moment that I feel like every family historian in particular remembers the first time they saw someone they knew in a historical record. And every day, every hour that you just keep working at this, you're trying to replace that first moment, and it keeps happening over and over again. So for me, the gratification is when I get to do that for other people and I get to see their expressions and I get to see them connect. And sometimes it's just almost surreal because there are aspects of this where when I'm with the person and I'm, either I've researched something for them or we're working on a project, and I have a feeling that this thing went this way, but I don't know because I haven't talked to them, and it happens that exact same way. It's uncanny. It is so, I can't even explain it. It's like you get to connect with a person's family so close and so intimately before you even know them. So in some ways, you're like bonded for life in a lot of ways. And that for me has been one of the most incredible aspects of this work and this job, is like all the people that I've connected with, whether they are famous or whether they're influencers or whether they're writing books or whatever, there's always this just unique and distinct connection and bonding that you just can't get anywhere else. And I think it's because it's family. It's something that we're born out of or that we were raised in. It's very close to us. And that, oh my gosh, I can't even describe it. Like it's the best. Like, to me, it's just the fact that I get to be a conduit with which to help tell those stories and to connect those folks. Like, man, like there are a few things on earth, maybe besides some good chocolate, that compare that compare to it.
One of your past roles was as the former project manager for the Alameda County, California Youth Ancestral Project, where more than 325 youth were taught the value of family history. I'm guessing you were able to see the light switch reaction in some of the kids as they began to appreciate the process. Yes?
Absolutely. I still keep in contact with so many of those young people. They are now in their 30s with kids. And I remember just watching them again, everyone, regardless of age, when they have that moment where they see the name of someone that they heard about or that they knew. For me, that moment was seeing my grandmother on the 1930 census as a teenager. I didn't know her as a teenager. I knew her as a fully grown woman, retired from Campbell Soup, living on the South Side at 3600 South Ellis. Okay. That's how I knew my grandmother. I didn't know her that way. And so for the young people, for them to see grandparents, great grandparents, and the just the wide variety of things that are on Ancestry, from pictures and photos and records and all of that, they just completely lit up. For some of them, they only knew the state. They didn't know the county. And so for some of them, that was when they got that information. There were other young people where they had ran into a family tree of another family member who had done the research on that side. So they lucked out big time. And that's just the beauty of how multi-generational this can be, where, don't necessarily think that it's someone hunkered down in their basement, with no lights on and, you still using a dial-up connection. We are well beyond that at this point. This is literally for everyone. And that moment of being able to replace that, oh my gosh, like that's what we all seek. Every time a new set of records comes out, there's that possibility, and that fairy dust is possible.
Although you live elsewhere in Memphis now, it sounds like you're here in Chicago fairly often. What are some things you love to do or places you love to go when you're in town?
Oh my gosh. For me, gotta go to Harold's. Like that's like, and I have to be in Hyde Park. That's where my uncle and my aunt, that's where they live. And so it's so funny. I actually was just there for the press part of the Women's History Month tour. And I was joking with my cousin. I said, I can't even believe I flew into that airport that doesn't exist, which is O'Hare.
Now, is the building where your parents lived before they moved still there?
You know what? I'm trying to remember if it is my grandmother, where my grandmother stayed. She stayed at 65th and Laughlin.
Okay.
That is still there. My grandmother's best friend bought a house, and it was multi-level, and my grandmother stayed on the second floor. So that's still there. Where my great grandparents live, 4905 South Michigan. See, this is how you know I was bred Chicago, is because I'm talking intersections.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't realize this until I met other Chicagoans, because this is how my mother still talks. She hasn't lived there for almost 50 years, and she still talks in intersections, which in California, we don't really do that. But yeah, like there's a lot of things, like Coppin Memorial, that's a family church that my dad's side went to. St. Luke, that's where my grandmother's folks were. There's so many landmarks. Like I almost can't visit them all. Everyone's either at cemeteries in Alsip, Blue Island, all those things. Yeah, I'm sort of, I don't know. I'm like a Chicago adjacent, I would
Oh,
say.
you're definitely dug in on Chicago. With the time we have left, we should talk about one of your latest projects, which is The
Yes.
Women Who Built Chicago. It is a bus tour and storytelling initiative by Ancestry. You're doing this with my friend Sherman Dilla Thomas. So the tour spotlights overlooked women who shaped the city. These tours are taking place on March 21st, 22nd, and 28th of 2026. Without spoiling too much, who are a few of the women that are discussed?
There are scores. My favorite part of this particular tour and this project is just the breadth of women that we get the opportunity to talk about. And, they're everyone from Mary Emerson Haven. Even though she was listed as keeping house, she was one of the founders of the YWCA in Chicago, and so you're not going to necessarily see a census that says that. Or Margaret Lin, Dr. Margaret Lin, who was an incredible physician, one of the first Chinese women doctors in the United States. And the fact that she was there, or someone that's a little bit closer to my family story, Dinah Washington. My mom actually sang at her funeral because it was at St. Luke. And so when we were looking through records to include for her on the site, and through the tour, we found the funeral being in the newspaper. And I was like, oh my gosh, my mom was there, to be able to connect those things. Even people like Marjorie Stewart Joyner, who was the right hand of Madam C.J. Walker. There's a lot of these stories where we came in as Ancestry and had found some of the stories, but connecting with Dilla, it really helped to ground the tour, especially for those kind of unsung, not as recognizable stories. Even people like Vivian Harsh or Margaret Burroughs, that are so important to Chicago and to maintaining the history of Chicago. It's again, when 90% of the statues in the city honor men, what better place would it be to illuminate the stories of women than to come to Chicago?
Well said. Limited tickets remain for the Women Who Built Chicago bus tour. The link to the tickets can be found in the show's notes. So, where should people interested in learning more about you and their ancestry go?
Please be sure to visit us at ancestry.com/stories of us.
Nicka Sewell-Smith, this has been a delight, and I really appreciate you joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode about the Women Who Built Chicago bus tour. Special thanks to my guest today, Nicka Sewell-Smith. Links to get tickets to the Women Who Built Chicago bus tour can be found in the show's notes. If you are fortunate enough to secure a ticket, make sure you tell Nicka you heard her on this podcast. As always, if you have any questions about anything covered today, anything to add, or have an idea for a future episode, I'd love to hear about it. Send me an email at chicagohistorypod@gmail.com. I have links to items related to Chicago's amazing history in the show's notes. If you or someone you know is a history nerd like me who would like to learn more, anything ordered through those links, not just the items listed, may earn a small commission for the podcast and help offset production costs at no additional cost to you. Check out the Chicago History Podcast social media pages for articles and pictures related to this episode and past episodes posted throughout the week. Much of the original art for the Chicago History Podcast used on the social media pages was created by John Kalamazoo Schneider. A sincere thanks, friend. If you need creative work done, you'll find no one better. Send him an email at angeleyesartjks@gmail.com. And we'll be back soon with more stories from Chicago's history. Until then, get out and explore when possible. Learn more about whatever city you live in, and stay safe.